congratulations, you've started. You've got your maps and you've done everything. Start. And now over our candidate nails for architecture, storytelling, art, and a little bit of practice. Alright guys, thank you Neil. Put this on here.
Okay, so you can all hear me okay? So, we're going to just review what we've done a little bit in terms of story. And just show the people who are watching on the screen that we have actually been learning about stories. We're learning about stories, right? You can see in different shapes and different sizes of stories around the place. So, what's the story? Define story for me, somebody. Yes.
That has a beginning, middle, and end, and sometimes has a climax where it leads to emotion and inspired legacy.
Ah, beautiful. A complex couple of words at a beginning, middle, and end. That might have a climax, some emotions, and deeper resonance meaning. Touching on a lot of things that stories are. Can anyone else find or give me something that fundamentally has to happen for a story to take place? There can be characters. There can be characterization. You can tell a story without characters. There has to be a fundamental what at the beginning of the story, the very end of the story. Change. To show the change. Everyone together?
Change!
That's what it's all about. There's a fundamental change in the story. Otherwise, it's just me rabbiting on for ages and talking about all of the things I saw and things I like, things I was really attached to. But unless there's a link between the beginning and the end to show some form of change, the home ground, or the stasis of the story, the story has to be taken place. Okay, lovely. We will be getting into the archetypes and archetypal story structure, but we also touched on semiotics. Yep. We also touched on semiotics, and so what's semiotics?
Different ways of experiencing the story?
Say again?
Different ways of experiencing the story?
Yeah, and semiotics is essentially the study of experiencing story, of how we experience meaning through story, and the study of meaning making. Okay, so I touched on some fundamentals in this kind of crash course that you're getting, and so one of the fundamentals is there's layers to a story. We talked about the different layers of stories. What are those different layers of stories? Figurative start. So what's the figurative? It's made up in the figurative level of story. Senses. Yeah, senses, and it usually sets up the scene in senses. So it gives a good way of landing that home ground, the spaces, the colours, the light, the sound, the moods, the feeling. That's all in there. You start the sensations of the story. And then you get carried on to the narrative level, and that's the beginning, the middle, the end, the structure that we look back at again. And that structure kind of follows what is usually, you can have a 7-point structure. Use an image here of a story structure. And when there's a story structure, you can hone in. Most story structures are very specific. You're all drawing your own designs. When you draw your own story line, it will change. The highs and the lows will fall and form as depending on any story. Okay? So this is a loose 7-base story structure. So, there's ordering smoothies, don't. That's distracting. Stop ordering smoothies. Too many smoothies. So, this is a loose structure. The man in the hole is the classic. See a man with maybe not so much, something terrible happens, the trigger and the response is he loses it all, then in order to climb out of the hole and ultimately end much better off than he was. So we went through kind of what a loose structure is, and I like to boil down what a structure is very simply for you, so that you can just hone in on it. So what are 7 points along a structure book? If you were to look at this, what's the start? Beginning. Another word for it.
Ordinary world.
The ordinary world, the home world, the landing world, the stasis, you can call it. Yeah, the home world, whatever you want. The beginning is also. But you have your opening chapter, and this is where you put in the bits of information that you need relevant to maybe showcase the change in the end of the story. Okay? And so a big part of semiotics is showing contrast. We create meaning through contrast. The light creates shadow, which literally illuminates objects in front of our eyes. So the contrast of things in stories is the same thing light does. So we just need to see a contrast, otherwise it's all light and no object and no meaning, or all darkness and no object and meaning. So we need contrast, and it's nice to get into the figurative level of a stasis for home ground, maybe showing that it's barren or it's in need of abundance, and in the end of the story, if it's a rebirth type of a story, shows, oh look, all the abundance. Okay, what happens early on in the story to make it get going? Comes a few times. Inciting incident. Bertie did a creative writing course and he knows that answer. Everyone else, it could be the trigger. Think of like the gun at the start of the race. You have to describe there's a racetrack, first of all. You tell me who the characters are in the lineup, their emotional state and stasis. Then you have to get things going. You can't spend too much time on that racetrack because you'll get bored. It might be really nice to describe all the colors and all the people. Okay, we can get on with it. So you need to trigger. Boom! Once you get going, then it's just cause and effect. The story moves on from something happens, and because of this, something else happens, and because of this, something else happens. And it usually leads to a climax. In stories, you always have what? Often have conflict. Absolutely. Otherwise, it's kind of boring. Here's a story about a man and a woman who got on really well for ages. Okay, boring. Okay, conflict. We want the meaty, juicy arguments. Yeah, absolutely. What else do we have in stories? Tragedy, depending on the type of story. Yeah. So we're looking at types. It can be tragic or it can be comedic. But in general, we tend to have definitely, you can't have tragedy unless you have character or characterization or emotion. And usually these things need some level of tension or surprises. And once you introduce surprises and tension and characters and conflict, these just kind of spiral off each other, and depending on the story, it will have different rises and different falls. I'd like to mention something I heard on the Emerald podcast, beautiful podcast, if anyone has ever listened to it. Sound waves, like the sound of a blender coming towards you. It's rising and falling. It's just rapidly rising and falling when it's in a high frequency like that. All sound waves, all light waves move like this. And stories are the exact same. Stories move up and down, it needs to rise, it needs to fall. And that also shows you how you need to deliver the story. You can't just stay monotone. You have to rise and fall with the dramatic nature of the story you're telling. Maybe it's just whispering or changing your tone, delivery. But it has to change. Change is always in the story. The more mini, micro changes the better. And so you have, ultimately, you mentioned this earlier, a climax to your story, and in oral tradition, you tend to get one good climax. Unfortunately, it's all like multiple. But we get there, and you get the one, and once you figure out what that conflict resolution is, you need to describe that resolve or resolution or end, and show the what?
The change.
Thank you! Show the change that happened from beginning, middle, and end. So here we go. We have the start, stasis, trigger, surprises, escalation, conflict, setback, tension, development, midpoint, climax, the highest emotional point, and the resolution, the change of it. Okay? Handy to have that. Just need a big photograph of it. Just like that's your loose structure. Those lines will change depending. But you're going to be doing a story today in groups, in pairs. And I'll be going around to you and hearing you tell these stories. And I want to see if there's crisis, if there's tension, if there's conflict, if there is an actual resolution. So this needs to be learned. The schema needs to be in the background of your imagination the whole time. Is if you place this structure on the random word game we played yesterday, for those of you watching, we played a random word association game, and I got everyone to visualize what's happening, right? And if you have this structure in your head, images land in a narrative. And then, what happens in the semiotics? We have images, sensory information, we have a narrative that we have in our head, the beginning, middle, and end, or hallucination in it. And then what happens in semiotics is the last layer was not deep meaning. You might find there's a deeper resonance, a deeper metaphor, a deeper way of looking at this story that has resonances for you or for the planet or for human nature as a whole. That's your deeper meaning. And when you find that deeper meaning, you go back up to your images and your creation point and you kind of start again. And you start populating in things that actually link and might create that metaphor a bit better. Okay? That seems a bit elusive right now, but if I'm talking about desertification, the beautiful forest plain, you know, the more of the savannah and the wind and the harshness I create at the start, obviously by the end of it, you can create that abundance. You can show that in lots of different ways. Okay, there's also lots of ways of looking at story arc, and just the one I gave you isn't the one you necessarily have to use. There's millions of them. Bertie's done a creative writing course. There's lots of different ways of looking at, you know, creative writing, novel writing, script writing. There's all different arcs to how you want to do it. Here's another simplified arc of story. You've got your beginning, the world before the story starts. Again, the racetrack, where the racers are, why they're there, the explanations, the inciting incident, that trigger I'm always looking for, that basically compels your protagonist into action, which then causes that action, cause and reaction. Forces of change begin to move in the first half, good or bad, depending on how you tell it. That midpoint is where you got to know the forces of good versus the forces of evil, if you're telling it that way. And the status quo pushes back in the second half, so you have your protagonist going against the oppressive nature of whatever regime they're fighting against in the classic journey. And the opposing format, of course, in that climax, begin to direct the conflict with clear or loose opposition. And then it resolves the world after the story. Alright, so why am I talking about structure? If you talk about types of story, you all remember types of story, right? I think there's 7 according to Christian Brooker, anyway, it's based off his book that we just pushed around again. There's lots of theories on this, lots of storytelling theory that you can get bogged down in, but I won't because I get you telling stories in a very short amount of time. That's fun. What are the 7 types of stories? Quest. What? Yeah. Yeah, we just call it a quest. Essentially, you will always have a hero, and when we went to archetypal stuff, it is more about the hero, but for now, it's called great.
Romance.
Nope, I don't think you were actually here for lessons. Weirdly not, romance is more of a lens and a thing that happens within all of these types of stories. So, what goes along? Remember I paired them?
Voyage and return.
Voyage and return, the hero protagonist goes away, fundamentally doesn't bring back anything, it's about the journey itself that has a change within them. What's next? Overcoming the monster, whatever planetary awfulness is coming at you, or whatever big evil monster is coming against you. You have to overcome it with either skill or grace or violence, as the last 100 years have told us what to do. But maybe we're figuring out new solutions. So, great, what's next? Rebirth. Really important for you guys looking at kind of the biodiversity of the landscape here. Rebirth is the literal story of plants. They live and they die. Look at the mycelial layer, it's the veil between worlds, of life and death. So we're really looking at this whole cycle of rebirth in a beautiful way. So rebirth is really important. What else?
Rags to riches.
The other or rags to riches. The most famous story of all?
Cinderella.
Cinderella. Every culture, because the world has always had rich people and poor people, has dreamt themselves into being rich. from being poor, the Cinderella story. Okay, we're just missing two. Tragedy. Everybody has that song in their head, thank you very much. And the opposite, tragedy, comedy. These are lenses in which to choose from, okay? Especially when I'm going to ask you to tell stories later, I'm going to ask you to put a lens of a type of story. We're going to make up some stories later, and that's totally fine, but choose what type of story it is, because that helps you ultimately find your ending, knowing where you're going. If you know what type it is, you know it's going to kind of end with the monster being slain, or the hero's return, or coming back after their experience with a lesson, or getting that object, or getting rid of that object. Depending on the type of story, you know the ending. It helps you find that ending. And I'm sure you've all been in a situation where you can tell the story, you can start the story, and how do you end it? How do you get to that interesting end? That's actually about knowing the type of story you're trying to tell. And when you know the type of story you're trying to tell, suddenly it just makes sense. It's like, oh yeah, of course. That's why I was always able to kind of go, oh yeah, I've got a rebirth story in my head, I've got a beginning, middle, and end. You've just thrown a load of images on my head. A clear structure in my head. I place those images along that arc, and then it made sense because I knew a rebirth had begun down here and ended up there. You know, light and dark. Okay, so that's a recap on structure and semiotics and all the things we're covering right now, which is a lot. It's a lot, isn't it, buddy? Thank you so much for giving back the phone. I hope you haven't downloaded so many games on my phone that I now have very big bills. Probably. Oh my, all the big bad video games? Alright. Anyway, the big bad video games. Overcoming the monster, huh? Okay, well, now we're going to look at archetypes. What do people know about archetypes? What do you know about archetypes? I'm throwing a lot of story theory at you, and that's why I repeat it and go over it again, because you're getting a lot of information in this course anyway. But in terms of just like landing it and letting it, I'll always go over stuff because it's iterative and you need to learn it, and then you need to learn it, practice it, and you forget it again and relearn it. So we're going over these, and archetypal story structure is what we're looking at today. So what's an archetype? Is it like a repeating?
Like a pathology.
Yes, right.
That show different psychic aspects of life.
Yes. Okay, probably.
That shows different type of characters. That show different psychic
Can you stay here if you want? Stay there and just play that. Okay. Sorry if we're online. 5-year-olds do be, you know, amazing crap. Okay, sorry, what's an archetype? Yes.
Different type of characters.
Different types of characters, yes.
Different type of spiritual and psychic aspects of life.
Nice. Spirit. Different types of characters that loosely portray different spiritual or mythic elements of life.
Psychic.
Psychic, yeah. Psychic levels of life. Absolutely. Anyone else know what an archetype is?
There's like survival archetypes that we embody, and then there's like thriving archetypes that we embody as humans naturally.
Lovely. Thriving or structural forces that we embody. Archetypal kind of energies that we can step into. Does anyone work with archetypes in that kind of way?
Yeah.
Stepping into roles, stepping into archetypal goddesses and gods is a very powerful way of resonating with archetypes. Again, I want to hear from more people as to what you understand archetypes to be.
Dad, it's not your phone!
The set of qualities that you
So sorry.
a set of characteristics, qualities that you embody.
Showing set of qualities that you can buy. Yeah, nice.
Like a conglomerate of ideas for a category that describes.
Yeah, conglomerate of. So you're all scratching at the surface of what this elusive term is, and it's hard to define it because essentially it is the dream space. And archetypes, is everyone know when I coined it? Jung. Right? So Jung did a lot of dream work. His theory was that archetypes are the shared mythos of culture. So we inherit these archetypes already. And my 5-year-old nephew has archetypes in his head because he knows what father is, he knows what mother is, he knows what bearer is, he knows what warrior is. He's picking up very, very quickly. And there's a lot of good archetypes and some bad archetypes. And stories are just filled with like very simplistic, especially children's books, very simplistic characters. The teacher, the guide, the friend, the foe. You know, and these are maybe inherited characters or characteristics of characters that are very embodied these characteristics very strongly from our ancestors who have gone through the dreaming, gone through the living, and essentially it's part of what we are built of. We are, in terms of part psychology, made up of very numerous different parts of ourselves, and each part can be broken down into archetypes. We have these archetypes within us, and that's why we resonate with stories when they're there. We don't always see eye to eye with the good guy in the movie, do we? Sometimes it's a bad guy. Sometimes it's, you know, it's like I'm the anti-hero, or the one that's pushed out of society because we're not quite in alignment with society. Why does that ring through so well? Yeah?
I wouldn't trust the movies, the big.
Yes, we'll get into that. We'll get into
Because
that.
they manipulate a lot with
100%.
these things.
It absolutely, movies do manipulate us and they make us feel emotions and they try to sell us things when we're in a vulnerable state. But understanding stories, understanding types of stories, you get to see it a lot clearer and you get to witness manipulation happening live. So this is the training, this is why it's so useful. Part of the reason so. What are archetypes? The concept was from Jung. Let me just read this. So Jung thought that we've inherited certain ancestral mental images from our earliest human ancestors. And these are present in the collective unconscious and therefore exist across culture. So again, they're all over the world, they're shared with many different cultures. And again, I love Michelle's description of culture. It's just this experimentation of different alive bodies sharing and competing for nutrients and also exchanging back what is growing from them. Looking at kombucha and how cultures tell stories, it sounds very similar. You have to put something in there to get something back out of it. Art and stories, as you'll find out today, when you get telling a story, listening to a story, and repeating a story, they're alive too, and we keep them alive by telling them. And one of the reasons Irish stories wasn't written down for a very long time is because one of the beliefs in Ireland was if you write something down, it dies. So you have to keep the stories alive by telling them. One of the reasons I have part of the meaning I've associated with storytelling is to keep these stories, these patterns of telling them alive. Because it's meaningful for me to be able to teach people to do it, and it also helps me make sense of my world, and it's a tradition that is getting lost. And so we forget that something very magical happens in the alive process, keeping it literal there, opposed to putting it into a fridge or stagnating or pasteurizing it as some kombuchas get. You know, you want to keep that alive rather than sterile and on paper. So, a lot of Jung's ideas came from the study of dreams and mythology. He believed the myths are a kind of collective dream with coherent language that speaks to what culture is crafted. The word is now used. The word is now also used to mean an idealized, essential, or purpose. It's kind of what we're getting at here. And it's not always clear which definition is using. So that's why it's hard to define, because the meaning is kind of changed over time now. We think, oh, an archetypal mother, an archetypal leader, an archetypal, warrior. That's great. It might not mean idealized as originally, but it kind of does now. Any questions before we go on? Okay. Yeah.
I'm just gonna ask, so then there's not like a set category of archetypes. It's just father is an archetype, mother is an archetype.
There are many versions of showing exactly the rule 14 archetypes, various theories. there's a lot online, find cross cultures, the rules of culture, shaman, medicine man, they're all, the names are kind of culturally contextual. So they're all like what you and king wasn't king of the land. So but it still means ruler, it still means leader. So yes and no, but loosely if you show me any set of archetypes that can show you, okay, this maybe is a combination, it's not many of them, or you're leaving out a couple here, but usually you inherently know if it's an archetype. The more complex a character, the more it deviates from an archetype. The more simplistic it is, and this is why you get like really strong characters in Disney movies and in children's movies, because they just stick with their archetype. And they fundamentally are a wizard. They make magic. They don't care about the other stuff. Leave me alone. I make magic, and it's fun because people are more complex than that. People have different parts of the talk. But if the ruler really wants to be a savior, that's great. That suits well to the background character who's just milking for that. And the bad guy is obviously very whatever. So you have more simplistic versions of but good question, and again, I invite you all to explore archetypes and find what resonates with you. And a lot of neo-paganism is about finding the whole forgotten gods and goddesses of Europe and of Ireland and of across different cultures that have been lost and forgotten, and try and reinterpret them and make meaning attached now and make sense of them for personal journeys. So if you applaud anyone doing that, I also put a big caveat of there's some misinformation out there and you need to find it for yourself and what resonates with you. Yeah, people might say, what's the exact? It's kind of like, what's the exact original story of their college? It's a lot of different authors. A lot of different things. So very quickly, archetypes are recurring characters. Types, they also don't have to just be characters. There's an archetypal journey that we look at now in terms of the structure of a story. So we've all probably heard of Joseph Campbell and his work here. But you can also have, or treat them as basic blueprints. There's human imagination, and this is why there's no such thing as original thought. If you come up with this amazing story, you dreamt it up, you're almost certainly pulling from inspiration somewhere. But there's no way you're not. And that's why I like to break down the 7 types of stories. Is there's only a few number of slots they can fit in for our conditions. So you find these archetypes of myths, heroes, the trickster, the wise one, the sage, the druid. In dreams you have a journey, a shadow figure, a guide approaches you, brings you off. Classic Scrooge story. And then you have these sorts of films. You have the rebel, the mentor, the innocent child, the novice. And they help us understand by associating with the parts of us that connect to them. And the roles we play in our lives and those stories resonate deep. Interestingly enough, when a story structure fits an archetypal story structure that we're going to go through now, or a basic beginning, middle, and end that I kind of summarize. When stories on eyewitness testimony match that archetypal structure, they're more believed. Okay? Whether or not they're true. But in studies where they've had fake stories and true stories come from eyewitnesses, the eyewitnesses that are often telling the truth can be scattered. They can be somewhat traumatized or emotional, and that derails your storytelling ability. That's why we do warm-ups, that's why we shake, that's why we breathe before telling a story, to calm the nervous system, to get yourself into a kind of a pragmatic way to then create. But if you are emotional and you're upset, you're going to be more scattered. And so eyewitness testimony that starts at the ending and jumbles in the end, it's way less trustworthy. So intuitively we pick up on falseness when it's scattered, even though it's not necessarily true. So it's very, very important for us to understand this so that we at least know if someone's being emotional, not necessarily lying, or if someone's telling you a very, very good story, it might not be necessary. And also how do you use that enhance it yourself. Alright. So yeah, archetypes don't limit creativity, they help deepen it by tapping into something already known not always conscious. There's a lot of understanding of the hero's journey and Joseph Campbell's journey, which is put up here. It comes up a lot. Joseph Campbell did a huge amount of study. Kind of maybe cherry picked a lot of stories from different cultures, saying every culture tells this story. Every culture has trees. There's he definitely cherry picked and kind of even when you read A Hero with a Thousand Faces, I think there's like not every single story in every culture follows this structure, but the model myth is created, and modern movies use it incredibly well. George Lucas is the first one who kind of started using it, and you can track. Who wants to track Star Wars Episode 1 on this right now? You can just see it, right? Just go through the plot points, right? The plot points of Star Wars. Homegrown. What's the name of it? Tatooine, right? He's just there's nothing going on, it's a big shit. He's a farmer, and all that, who runs through that. Call to Adventure. What's Call to Adventure? He rides and lands in. Luke must follow me. Oh fuck! He meets the guide. It's kind of like he has a dream, and he actually meets us. Two different scenes. Confronting the dragon. What happens?
Confronting his father.
Fucking yeah! He doesn't actually mean his father. The oppressive, colonizing dark force of the Empire comes and meets him as runaway. So he sees the oppression, he sees the dragon, he sees the opposition, he's made aware of it. It's also a good way of getting like the trigger, but loosening out exactly where that lands. In a movie you have more kind of triggers that. Casts, trials and allies. Who does he meet? What does he do? Han Solo, Chewbacca! I'm Princess Leia, of course. Before he knew his sister got weird. Well, she was so great, so it alright Dark Knight of the Soul. Do you remember the movie that follows? Suddenly someone's defeated, they have to run away. That's not a good moment. Discovery, they realize, maybe there is a weakness in the Death Star. We just had the Dark Knight of the Soul where they saw the Death Star moving in, and we're all completely screwed. Nobody can stand against it. Something happens. A surprise. Tension is resolved. The refusal to return. That's pretty sure it's up. Han Solo saying, "No way! I'm getting out of here. It's not my fight, buddy." And Luke saying, "Well, Princess Leia's really hot. I'm gonna stay around." That's before I knew you shoot myself. Okay. The journey or death might have been. Yeah, that's Obi-Wan standing up. He plays
The first one.
Yeah.
Quite early on.
Yeah. So he's shot literally to death. So his hero, his guide, his mentor, his teacher, he gets killed, and so suddenly the hero has to take his place.
The hero got his hand cut.
That's the
Okay.
So again, yeah, but he's repeat. Rebirth and renewal again. He goes back. He's putting on his helmet. He's going to do the thing. He's going to be part of the good guys. The return, he's flying up there, and he takes that one. He knows what he's aiming for. He uses the force. He trusts and heroic reflection. The fact that the Death Star is destroyed. He can go back home, and all is good for now. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so we've got to lead on, and the whole thing happens again. All right, so you can literally go through movies and check these out. Pretty much, they like. Obviously, every now and again it's a slight tweak, but if it's not the death, it's some form of other surprise, something else is in it. And blockbuster movies tend to have these death, and they kind of almost go boom, and in the first third of the movie you're going to meet all the buddies, have all the fun, And you know something's going to go pretty hairy halfway through the road. You can see that. So it's limited. The archetypal story structure is limited. So it's not be all and end all. It is kind of handy to mix the voyage and return story of Brand. It's a story of an Irish king going across the other world. He's bored at home. He gets an invitation by a beautiful woman from the island of women. And he's like, hell yeah. But, that's the hero, the song from the word. He meets Madeline McNear, the guy, the king of the sea, the god of the ocean. He's like riding over the waves as if it's just, you know, as easy as that. And he says, keep going, just take a left at the next rock. And you'll find the island of women. So eventually, he sees strange islands, he has trials, he loses some allies, some death happens. He loses an ally to the island of laughter. He discovers the island of women. He refuses to return, he will not go back, and he tries to go, he tries to run away, but she keeps on reeling back into it. It's a literal wool. I swear to God, she uses wool, she doesn't try to sail away, she's frozen with wool, reels them back in. He's like, no! I want it, but I don't, but I do, but I don't. So, and then eventually, he gets the hell out of there, and he fails to return. And then the end of the story you don't have the heroic reflection. It doesn't go on long. You can't go back to the other world. So you're kind of left on a cliffhanger. The resolution is that he's still out there somewhere sailing in the other world, waiting for his invitation to come back to this world. Or whatever way you want to issue the story. So some stories stop before the return. Obviously, you don't quite always get every point.
Anyone
point out some
Yeah,
issues?
figured it makes sense. Ran out of storage, may as well stream everything and save it. Just me taking notes.
Is it a good idea just to have one structure for any story?
Aaron? Mm-hmm.
It's a bit predictable. And also, not all stories are relatively shoehorning. Similar with agriculture, is it a good idea to plant one crop? No, agriculture is bad. Tell the internet it's bad. Diversify. So we need a couple of diverse options here. What are some of the issues or
That's
what do anyone not like Campbell's structure?
Well, not over-reliance on the hero.
Absolutely, it overlays on the hero. It's only the story about that one great hero. Obviously, if you get other interesting characters like Han Solo, it makes it easier, but if you don't, then you're kind of stuck on this one person and it's their journey. And if you don't relate to it, you're not going to give a shit. So yeah, there's no reliance on just that one story rather than the hero. Anything else?
Often oversimplifies good and evil.
Oversimplifies good and evil. Absolutely, and like that's one of the issues with maybe modern culture and entertainment these days. Is we have very dualistic ways of looking at good and evil, black and white, quite literally. I'm pretty sure my brother's dog is a racist because he barks at him, so dark walks into the room. And like, it just is. But also we have an awful lot of racial structure in like the line. Does anyone realize how racist that movie is? Like Scar has black eyebrows. You know, he's the darker one. He's in the layer with the dark shadows, and it's just, and then the shining white, nerdy looking Simba pops up. You're like, cool, yeah, all right, white is good, black is bad. You know, so there are subtle meanings being inferred in all these, and it enforces these biases when we don't look at them closely. So that's a very good one. It oversimplifies good and evil.
I'm not here if I'm wrong, but I feel like having the hero as
Yeah, I think like movies like Brave, the more modern, especially this year, are now doing a lot more on that, trying to make the female archetype, which is going to bring me on to why that is different. Because men and women are fundamentally different, and there is some, there's a few critiques that we've written down in terms of like it reduces everything to a monomyth. We come back to female journeys. There was something called Anastasia. She's an amazing writer, and she's kind of done her own work on the woman, the heroine's journey. But let's just maybe, yeah, projects Anglo-Western storytelling and cultural values onto indigenous mythic narratives with different storytelling norms. What's that mean? That means the deeper meaning that Western cultures idealize or like as morals, and the lessons and deep meaning that have worked there are just also now placed onto other stories that don't necessarily have those cultural norms and lessons and metaphors associated with it. So you're blending a bit too much maybe, and you're not looking at the uniqueness that is in each different culture that places different archetypes actually in a different hierarchy. So, you know, in Ireland it was a matriarchal society, and women were seen as the householders, and they inherited the home, and men came into it, and people were buried around the female head of the family. Women had rights to divorce, owning land. This is before we got occupied, and realization that we need to go to. But we don't hear that story because it really goes against modern capitalism, the way we like to think that feminism is a new thing. We finally got out of all the history of always beating down on women, and now it's a good idea to maybe keep it up. No, other cultures are far more progressive ways of looking at how to balance the situation. Sure. So it's also some mental. It's overly focused on the hero, highly individualistic, celebrates one individual going out alone and coming back to the face of glory. Well done, that one person. You know, there's no collectivism. There's not as much unity. There's not as much focus on culture and integration. It's less focused. So it's all again. It's that Americanization of you work hard and die hard trying. You know, be the American dream. If you can do it, if I can't do it, you can do it too. If you work hard enough, you get your goal. It promotes that type of thinking. If you have to struggle, then struggle is good. Sometimes you're born into it, sometimes you can't get out of it.
It's always like a lot of times there's like a whole group, and if you see one character, you have a main character, but if he doesn't have all his friends,
very good in Japanese stories. You tend to have a focus where the main character needs his friends and his allies before he can succeed. If he does not have that, then he's isolated and alone, and no Ronin can survive on their own. Right? You have to be in a culture which you can relate. Again, cherry pick different points of view. I mentioned that as well on the journey from different myths. Few, if any, actually follow that exact. That's kind of like you say, like find some in Irish mythology that stick to a lot of them, but not all of them. He just, I think he also figured out like the emotional rises and falls in us are programmed for kind of an hour and a half to go through that many steps. You know, it's kind of a good time to experience it. Okay, so feminine journey. Characteristically called estes. If you don't know her, ladies, look her up. If you don't know her, lads, read her for sure. Characteristically called estes. Phenomenal writer, brilliant in terms of like how to become an elder. She's loads of books, and one of the things she worked on is the feminine journey, which is distinct from the hero's journey. The home ground starts off usually barren, but there's some form of, again, it did in Star Wars too. It doesn't always have to do in the hero's kind of journey. They can maybe go from a place of wealth to more spiritual awakening, whatever it is. But the home ground tends to start off barren. If you've seen the Disney movie Brave, the role model, the guide, interesting enough, is not there. It's not very present. It's outside of the. It's maybe something we heard of, a mother that's passed, a teacher, a memory. There's something. There's a role model that this woman is trying to become. Some kind of queen archetype is there, or the woman king. The crisis, the trigger, the inciting incident, that thing that gets the story going, the reason to go for the call it the adventure, which is called the crisis. The awakening, which is interesting, it's kind of like the trials and allies, but actually it's a very individualistic journey. She has to go on a reception to awaken into her newfound ability and mode, and then she takes action hilariously. And when I might tell this, it resonates. You take action, you meet adversity, and then you struggle self-belief, and you do it all over again. And you take action, and you struggle, and self-belief crumbles, and you do it all over again. And it just goes in this cycle a few times, because it doesn't happen straight away. It tends to be a rise and fall of action and failure, and action and failure, and eventually action that holds. That self-realization that maybe she was doing it the wrong way all along, and she was maybe doing something different, or whatever it is, depending on the story. Self-realization or actualization, or becoming that queen, renewal of the home ground, and suddenly that's just to show you that there is difference in these modalities. There is no one exact thing, but when we talk about permaculture journeys, I like to tell people it's more than just Joseph Campbell, and there's lots of reasons not to love that exact thing, pick it apart and understand that we've been fed the monomyth since birth. We look at things dualistically, and we see right and wrong, we see good and bad, and we look for happy ever after, put a lot on our partners as a result of all of these stories that we consume and built up our own unconscious biases. Just looking for these actors. And they're strong and they're reassuring and they're nurturing when you find them, but they're not always realistic. Example is the Children of Lear for famous members of Ireland. Beautiful Fionnuala lives with her father. The ideal is out there, there's a role model as a mother, and you have a crisis. Aoife marries Lear, 3 kids are all happy, but they don't like the new wife, they run off and spend all the time with their dad. Aoife gets jealous of the kids, curses them, and then they become swans, but Fionnuala manages to keep her voice and sing with her brothers, and they go to 3 different lakes all over Ireland for 300 years each, and they're completely and utterly distraught, but that's what they have to keep on doing. They basically repeat trials depending on the different lake, the struggle to survive, the wind, the weather, and they go off and do it again. And Fionnuala is the kind of mother of, well, the mother role of her brothers in this, and she kind of basically keeps their story alive until she tells their story to a hermit. Many hundreds of years later, they restore it back to humanity, and then they die. Very happy. It's actually a French story.
I'm curious, it kind of comes up a lot in the Irish folklore here, just these longer spreading wheels of time. What do you think the purpose is of having it last hundreds of years or 1,000 compared to what we understand as our lifetime?
Good question, but you man, in mythology, I would say, certainly in Irish mythology and Celtic mythology, you have a big example of passing time, and showing that hundreds of years and thousands of years have passed. And why is that? Can anyone else answer that question? It's a very good question. Why do you think that great passages of time and adversity are shown in mythology? Especially Irish mythology, I suppose, but certainly global myths show big movements of time and change and adversity and repetition. We sure that we're going through cycles, for sure, and we have to learn what we have to learn. I think humility. Big stories teach you an awful lot of humility if you understand what has gone on before you, and if you're tapping into a great lesson of mythology. People have gone through this before. You're not on your own. Lots of people have felt these emotions. So many that the ground you're standing on is built up of their broken down bodies from my feel there that take hundreds of years. When your mind gets a bit blown, you get out of your own story, your own head, and suddenly maybe your own problems. Don't seem so worried. That'd be my answer. And I think, yeah, in Ireland, it's just the oldness is in the landscape, the tragedies in the landscape. You kind of see it, sense it, or aware of it. I think it resonates there, especially because it's ancestral work. It's going back to, oh look, and it's going back into architecture. Look at all of these heroes and legends and warriors and victims, children and innocents and warriors and cultures that came before us and learned these lessons, forgot them, and now we're going to learn them again. You know, so I think it's just the action of reminding yourself daily that you're not in this alone. In my humble opinion. Okay. Thoughts on our story structure? Can you use this? Is this helpful? In what way is it helpful? Nice. Really, 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 really important. It helps simplify characters in a story without getting too complex. Keep it simple, stupid. Just boil it down. Yesterday we were just playing word games, and even then I could see people trying to say something smart, or say something clever, or use a word that would, you know, keep it simple. And oftentimes the simplest word generated a laugh. You went, oh, that's so simple, it's fine. Yeah. And because it's nice, it's reassuring when you just keep things simple. And when characters are honestly just based on architecture, it helps us go, yeah, so got it. And it helps it keeps things simple. What else does it use? It gives you structure, 100%. It gives you structure. The archetypal work that I did with Neil on looking at his origin story, and looking at his brand, looking at the work that he's trying to put out in the world. That's based on that hero's journey. You can place yourself into this journey, and if your brand is very associated with your life, then it will help you find an archetype that you resonate and that you land with. This is, in a way, a very expensive corporate workshop that I do for people to boil down and give you for free. Okay, so you can use this in terms of branding. You can go.
That's going to be my question. Like, how can we apply this model to what we're like producing developing here? Like from my lens into the building, convincing investors.
Getting down to exactly what it is that you're speaking from. What archetype are you speaking? That helps you. Okay, what's the story? What's the type of story? Again, you can, like this way, I encourage you to look at various different archetypes, see what ones resonate with you, listen to more mythology and folklore, especially related to biodiversity in the world, sky god, earth mother. You know, that's the oldest story across culture. Most have a sky god and an earth mother. There's something in there. But if you're looking for investors for a permaculture project, it's going to be something along those lines. Like creating abundance, creating peace, creating harmony, creating food. And these come in plenitude with fertility goddesses. And our Nimble that we're coming up to now is close to the Irish god Bridget. And she was about creativity and fertility and abundance and childbirth and a lot of associated aspects, but she is the aspect of creativity and invention, so you have to get creative with this too. It is the right time to be asking these questions. Going, how does that work? How does it apply? You go back down, place yourself or your company or your story with your group or your land or this idea that you have as a brand. Maybe it's not a brand, but maybe it's, I'm just going to use the word brand to say your package. Whatever it is that you are holding on to, that can be in your little group, you can do that together, or specifically what you're working with or want to maybe work on. Okay, go back to what you're maybe working with. Find out what it is that your message wants, needs, and then place it in the architecture story. Place that in the story. What is your home? Where was your call to adventure? Who were your guides? Where were your trials and errors? It gives you like pushes to kind of do that work. You have to do the work yourself, you have to find that story yourself. If it's a personal journey, then it's your story. If it's a story with a company, then it's your story in relation to that company. And if it's your own brand, then it's this ideal that you're trying to find. And then, you know, make that story up. If it's not real, make it up. Find it, and then it doesn't have to be your sales pitch. It doesn't have to be your elevator pitch. That's not what we're making. This is the movie. Okay, this is the structure for the movie. This is the background knowledge that you have in your head that you have before that elevator pitch. That you can boil down and go, right, I found my archetype. Now I know what I'm dealing with. I know the kind of the fundamental archetype. I'm dealing with Neil found Lou Log Fada, the Sunday. He was very much Luke Skywalker. You know, he was lost, he didn't have any skills, he asked lots of questions, he remembered the answers because he was kind of magic that way. He was shown a skill once, he became master at it for always, but he continued to ask questions. And whenever people came with something, he used it and harnessed it. And he knew exactly what he was aiming for. Balor's evil eye. And he had one shot, and he threw it from way too far away. He cast it in the slingshot, and it hit the back of the eye and blew it out of his head. The Death Star was destroyed. Okay, so he found, okay, he needs precision, he needs aspects of his story resonated with you. Find the aspects of the story of the goddess, of the god, of the person that resonate with your story. It's going to change. You just started drawing your maps today. This is the loose schema too. You're drawing your maps, you're finding what sticks. Throw more at it than you think you might need in terms of references. Listen to some word mythology. Listen to some goddess story. See if something lands. And then when you're like, oh, that works. I like this, maybe I like, whatever, maybe I like Mari. She's a powerful being, Kali, essentially, the destructive force. Maybe I like that. Maybe I want to be Kali, right? Okay, but like figure that out and find other maybe stories that do or do not resonate. And then, yeah, once you know that voice, in Canada Tales, we did this work and we found Bridget. Because everything that we do should inspire creativity and inspire us to keep being creative with it. And that cycle has worked. As I put stuff out into the world, it's received, come back to me, and helps motivate me to do more. And put out free podcasts, and do free workshops, and then, you know, do these and get paid for it. But, you know, it continues to feed my soul and nurture meaning into my work, because I've gone down that rabbit hole, oh, so many rabbit holes, of what goddess, how do I resonate with Bridget, what is it about her, and the origin story of Canada Tales, that homegrown with Sarah could tell me stories as a kid. You know, my sister who I work with, and we eventually had kind of, okay, we need to make a decision if we're going to do this, and with many trials and tribulations with musicians and collaborators. Man, did we face the dragon a few times. There's always a dragon. But we, you know, and we failed. We went back and we tried again, and we were renewed. All of those things did happen, but ultimately it led us to go, oh yeah, this is a Bridget story. This is the Bridget archetype that we're embodying as we're going through these steps. And actually the main character in our story, if we want to tell it, is Bridget archetype. And that's what we found the Bridget archetype. Bridget is like a goddess of fertility, inspiration, creativity. Imbolc is the Celtic festival of spring, which starts in February. And Bridget is very associated.
You notice through your life that you evolve. Like how often?
How often do I find I swap between, every few hours. Like, you know, how often do you swap between archetypes? Yeah, like, if anyone saw me and my brother having a fucking argument this morning, you know, like, we're just go straight back to the children now. Yeah, don't just give me a sarcastic answer. Let's go drink my fucking coffee. You know, like, you know, so we revert and we change. We're not the ideal person all of the time. You know, he was saying Ram Dass is really brilliant at speaking about all of the beautiful paradigms of spirituality, and you know, it breaks it down so brilliantly. But he's still just a dude, you know, and he has his desires and his plans and his issues, and you know, he's just a dude. very good at telling stories. Yeah.
It's related with the sub-personalities that we all have.
Subconscious, yeah. That's back to the Jungian stuff. You know, like unconsciously we have these biases. Yeah, it is related.
The interesting work is to get them more conscious. So if you use them consciously.
Maybe. You tell me? Perhaps. Okay, so I'm going to finish up this live right now. And before you have lunch, you're going to have time to do a little bit of pair work. So part of this permaculture and storytelling design course, what's that? Part of this storytelling design course with storytelling as a focus is getting people to tell their stories better. My job is to get everyone in this room telling stories, and we've heard a lot of theory. We practiced a bit yesterday, but now you have a lot going on in your head and you're not being very creative. So I'm going to get people into pairs, and I'm going to get you telling stories to each other and listening. The best part about a storyteller, the hardest part, the hardest lesson to learn, is you have to be a brilliant listener. I've been talking for way too long. The exercise is very simple. You can do this with a pair at home. You just find a person, tell a story to.